Hey, hey, hey. Welcome back to another out of this world story from Mr. Fictionality. The Mask and the Bean, a French frolic. Stanley Ipkis, the mild-mannered bank clerk with a penchant for cartoonish antics, was done with Seattle. The Mask, his mischievous alter ego, had landed him in more hot water than a geyser, and it was time for a change. A long-awaited vacation in France, specifically the Glitzy Can Film Festival, was exactly what the doctor, or rather, what his increasingly frayed nerves ordered. But Stanley, ever the cautious soul, knew he couldn't completely abandon the Mask. The green-faced goofball was a part of him now, a source of both chaos and unexpected luck. So, before boarding the plane, Stanley decided to pack the Mask along, hoping a little bit of green magic might see him through the chaotic trip. Airport encounter. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport buzzed with the usual pre-flight frenzy. Stanley, decked out in a reasonably normal outfit, a valiant attempt at anonymity, clutched his passport and a worn duffel bag. He was hoping to avoid any unwanted attention, but fate, or perhaps the Mask's inherent mischievousness, had other plans. As Stanley navigated the crowded security line, he felt a familiar tug at the back of his head. It was the Mask, whispering promises of wild adventures and comedic chaos. Stanley sighed. All right, just a little bit, he muttered, discreetly slipping the Mask into his pocket. Just then, a loud, boisterous thwack echoed through the otherwise orderly line. Stanley turned to find Mr. Bean, his longtime friend, attempting to flatten a particularly stubborn croissant with his elbow. His usual expression of bewildered serenity was punctuated by a scattering of pastry crumbs on his tweed jacket. Bean, oblivious to the startled stares of nearby passengers, rummaged through his pockets, pulling out a handful of crumpled British pounds. "New friends! Treats for my new friends!" he exclaimed, offering the money to a bewildered security guard. The ensuing commotion was a symphony of confusion. The security guard, visibly flustered, tried to politely explain that the currency wasn't acceptable in the States. Bean, his face knitted in a look of deep confusion, responded with a series of increasingly frantic gestures and unintelligible babbling, much to the delight of the watching crowd. Stanley, seeing his chance to blend into the background amidst the pandemonium, slipped the Mask on. Suddenly, the airport transformed into a surreal cartoon. The Mask, as ever, delighted in the chaos, throwing rubber chickens and launching into a series of increasingly ridiculous dance moves. The security guards, overwhelmed by the scene, found themselves juggling rubber chickens and attempting to contain a chaotic jigging Bean, while a giggling crowd watched on. Somehow, after a prolonged, yet hilarious, standoff, the security team finally managed to corral Bean and a thoroughly bewildered Stanley into a separate room for questioning. After a series of increasingly bizarre explanations and even more bizarre impersonations by the Mask, they were finally cleared to board the flight, leaving behind a bemused and somewhat relieved security staff. Train trip. The transatlantic flight was thankfully uneventful, if a little cramped. Stanley, still reeling from the airport incident, spent most of the journey trying to keep the Mask's antics in check. He reasoned that a little bit of normalcy was what he needed before unleashing the Mask's full potential upon France. However, the moment they stepped onto the train heading towards Nice, the inherent wildness of the Mask proved too strong to contain. They were seated in a compartment crammed full of people, mostly French, all of whom were politely observing the pair of clearly bewildered tourists. Stanley, trying to maintain a semblance of composure, found himself battling the Mask's unrelenting urge for silliness. A little giggle, a sudden burst of cartoonish animation, a misplaced wink. It all started subtly. Then, the dam broke. The Mask took control, and the train carriage became his personal stage. He launched into a nonsensical juggling act with a selection of Mr. Bean's travel accessories: a toothbrush, a comb, a miniature teddy bear, and a rather unfortunate-looking pair of socks. The previously polite passengers erupted into laughter. Bean, initially bewildered, joined in with gusto, making a series of comical faces and mimicking the mask's antics with a joyful abandon. Stanley, flustered but secretly enjoying the attention, tried to rein in the mask, but it was futile. The playful alter ego was determined to entertain the whole carriage. Passengers started joining in, mimicking the mask's moves, some even joining Bean in his spontaneous and hilariously clumsy attempts at juggling. The entire carriage transformed into a cacophony of laughter and absurd movements, making it a memorable and slightly chaotic journey towards their destination. Finding the child. Nice greeted them with sunshine and the scent of jasmine. Stanley, still recovering from the train journey, felt a flicker of hope that perhaps he could unwind and enjoy his vacation. However, fate, as it often does, had other plans. As they emerged from the train station, Mr. Bean, captivated by a street performer juggling brightly colored balls, momentarily lost sight of the young boy who had been clutching his hand. The boy, startled by the loud noises and the flashiness of the street performer, accidentally dashed into the crowd. Before either Stanley or Bean could react, the boy was swallowed by the bustling crowd. Stanley, instantly alert, recognized the seriousness of the situation. The mask, ever the protector of the innocent, immediately took over. "We've got a kid to find," he bellowed with characteristic enthusiasm. He instructed Mr. Bean to stay put, Bean, and don't get distracted by any more juggling, before launching himself into the crowd to find the lost child. The mask, with his infectious energy, charmed his way through the throngs of people, his voice booming with promises of candy and ice cream if anyone had seen a small, lost boy. Meanwhile, Mr. Bean, left to his own devices, managed to turn the street performer's act into a chaotic ballet of mishaps, with the unfortunate juggler frantically trying to finish his act amidst Bean's enthusiastic but clumsy attempts at assisting. At one point, Bean accidentally swallowed one of the juggler's balls, only to promptly cough it up with a surprised, yet thoroughly satisfied expression. While the street was in hysterics, Stanley, finally locating the lost boy, discovered he was holding onto a small, leather-bound notebook with the word printed in gold on the cover. The boy, relieved to be found, clung to the mask in silent comfort. Stanley, realizing the boy's father must be frantic, decided to use the notebook to locate the parent. A quick glance through the pages showed pictures of the boy with a man sporting a distinct handlebar mustache. Stanley, energized by the mask's determination, sprang into action, leaving Bean to continue his comedic chaos on the streets, and went in search of the missing father. Remorse complex. Stanley, however, knew he wasn't just dealing with a lost child situation. He'd also heard whispers about gangsters looking for him after the chaos he'd created back in Seattle. The mask, in his desire to assist the boy and solve the situation, had unintentionally left a trail of havoc that could alert the gangsters to his whereabouts. With a heavy heart, Stanley decided to take the mask off, hoping to blend into the crowd and avoid any confrontation. Sadly, this plan was short-lived. A sleek black limousine pulled up beside him, and out stepped two men in sharp suits, their faces hardened with a sense of purpose. They were the muscle, undoubtedly hired by the gangsters, and they knew who he was. "We've been expecting you, Mr. Ipkis," one of them sneered, his voice dripping with menace. "Your little act has caused quite a stir." Stanley, caught off guard and feeling the chill of fear, quickly realized his mistake. He was outmatched in this situation. There was no hiding or running. In a desperate act of self-preservation and a flash of inspiration, realizing that there was no time to explain, he swiftly put the mask back on. The change was instantaneous. The meek, fearful Stanley was gone, replaced by the flamboyant, chaotic mask. The gangsters, caught off guard by the sudden transformation, momentarily stood frozen by the sheer ridiculousness of the situation. The mask, seeing his chance, retaliated with a playful grin. He dodged the gangsters' punches with ease, each dodging move eliciting a comedic sound effect and a humorous expression. He then proceeded to engage them in a bizarre battle of wits, using a series of slapstick routines and silly jokes to confuse and distract the two gangsters. He even employed the services of a nearby mime, who, seemingly enjoying the chaos, got unintentionally involved in the street battle, providing a series of comical interventions. The ensuing chase through the streets of Nice was a spectacle of pure absurdity. The Mask, relying on his uncanny ability to bend the laws of physics, bounced off buildings, dodged furniture being unceremoniously thrown out of a nearby window, and used his newfound ability to talk to pigeons to confuse and distract the gangsters. Bean, seeing the chaos and sensing that he was part of the plan, joined in, tripping the aggressors with strategically placed banana peels. The scene was a testament to the unpredictable nature of the Mask and the remarkably chaotic nature of Mr. Bean. The gangsters, utterly bewildered and exasperated by the unexpected turn of events, were eventually forced to retreat, leaving the streets of Nice in a state of bewildered hilarity. Arrivals at Cannes. Finally, after a series of misadventures and comical escapes, Stanley and Bean arrived in Cannes. The air was thick with anticipation and excitement. The streets were alive with the buzz of the film festival, a whirlwind of glamour and glitz. It was a far cry from the chaotic streets of Nice, but the gangsters, who were just as determined as the Mask to reach the event, were hot on their heels. As they stepped out of the train station, they were greeted by the sight of a luxurious limousine arriving to the scene. One of the men that was previously defeated by the Mask pulled out a gun, but suddenly, the Mask's voice boomed through the entire station. He was hidden on the ceiling, using his uncanny ability to cling onto any surface, and he reminded the gangster of the previous incident that had taken place in Nice, whilst using his newfound ability to instantly morph into a series of animals, including a particularly loud and obnoxious pigeon. The gangster was terrified and surprised, and with a newfound respect for the Mask, he quickly left in his shiny limousine. Stanley and Bean, exhausted but relieved, made their way towards their hotel, trying to keep a low profile. They were still aware of the gangster's presence, although they didn't know how or when they would react. Culinary mishaps. The hotel they were staying in was a grand old building, filled with the scent of old wood and expensive perfume. Despite their earlier adventures, Stanley and Bean finally managed to relax for a few hours before deciding to explore the local cuisine. They found a charming little restaurant nestled in a quiet corner of the city. The atmosphere was delightful. Stanley ordered a simple plate of pasta, while Bean, in a state of oblivious enthusiasm, ordered an entire assortment of the restaurant's most exotic dishes. Suddenly, the Mask's laughter filled the air. There was a distinct green glow emanating from Stanley's face, and a sudden wave of energy swept through the restaurant. The food began to glow with a mystical light, and in a flash, the otherwise normal restaurant transformed into a culinary spectacle. The pasta Stanley was eating began to sing a playful melody. The sauces began to dance, mimicking a ballet. The bread formed cartoonish faces and began to tell jokes. The vegetables jumped on the tables and performed a series of funny acrobatic moves, while the local wine flowed like a waterfall. The patrons, bewildered and fascinated, watched in astonishment as the food put on a show, becoming part of a hilarious orchestra. Bean, completely unaware of the transformation he'd inadvertently caused, began to conduct the musical food with a spoon and a rather inappropriate-looking teacup. The event was a complete success. The local authorities, however, eventually arrived on the scene after getting numerous complaints about the loud music and the vegetables throwing themselves on the pavement. They were initially confused by the situation, but ultimately, they were charmed by the joyful chaos. After some playful explanations from the Mask and an even wilder, more comical set of explanations by Bean, they ended up joining the party. Spy pranks. The following days were filled with a mix of sightseeing, relaxation, and the ever-present threat of the gangsters. Stanley, now acutely aware of the Mask's notoriety, decided to play a cautious game. He would simply enjoy his vacation, while carefully keeping an eye out for any sign of the hired goons. The mask seemed content to stay in the background for a while. Stanley assumed it was a sign of the mask's remorse for the chaos that he had caused, but he knew eventually it would be difficult to keep him hidden. One evening, while attending a charity gala, Bean, captivated by the sheer number of attendees sporting cummerbunds, decided to intervene. He began to pull off their cummerbunds, thinking that they were a sort of joke and that other people were trying to hide something inside them. While Bean was busy stripping the fashion-conscious crowd of their accessories, the mask decided to use the opportunity to strike. He launched into a series of extravagant dance moves, attracting the attention of the gangsters. The mask's sudden appearance reminded the crowd of the events of the past few days, and the event suddenly turned into a full-blown comedic intervention. The mask then used the distraction created by Bean to help the young boy's father escape the gangsters and reunite with his son. Funniest Festival. The Cannes Film Festival was in full swing. The red carpet was a spectacle of dazzling lights, designer dresses, and celebrity sightings. But amidst the glamour, Stanley and Bean, with the mask lurking not too far behind, were about to become the unexpected stars of the show. Stanley, attempting to blend into the crowd, was quickly overwhelmed by the mask's inherent yearning for the limelight. The mask, unable to resist the allure of the red carpet, decided to make a grand entrance. He appeared out of nowhere, dressed in a ludicrously oversized tuxedo and carrying a microphone, and launched into a series of improvised songs and nonsensical jokes. The paparazzi, initially baffled and then utterly delighted by the spectacle, started snapping photos at a furious pace. The crowd, initially unsure of the situation, erupted into laughter. The mask, never one to shy away from the spotlight, began to interact with the bewildered guests and celebrities, pulling pranks and engaging in silly skits. Bean, unable to resist the joyous chaos, joined in with gusto, performing a series of hilarious and slightly terrifying charades mimicking the movie stars as they walked the red carpet. The chaos and laughter caught the attention of the gangsters, who, upon seeing the mask on the red carpet in full force, rushed towards the scene with a fury. Limo ride. The gangsters, finally losing their cool, attempted to seize the mask and the boy. They attacked. However, the mask, having predicted this move, was just as keen to take the opportunity to make a quick getaway. A limousine appeared out of nowhere. The mask leaped inside, the gangsters close behind. Bean, not knowing what was going on but fully involved in the chaos, joined the back of the limousine just in time. Stanley, as the mask, took control. The limo, under the mask's direction, became a wild, unpredictable machine, dodging traffic, jumping over traffic dividers, and launching onto sidewalks in a series of hilarious jumps. The mask's driving, however, was not without its challenges. At one point, in his excitement, he managed to collide with a street vendor stall, sending a mountain of fruits and vegetables flying in a chaotic explosion. Bean, meanwhile, sat in the back seat, watching the spectacle with a mixture of terror and delight. He repeatedly gasped, "Holy moly!" and began to enthusiastically take photos of the scene with his camera, completely unaware of the danger they were in. The gangsters, meanwhile, attempted to get control of the situation, but the mask's unpredictable driving led to a series of hilarious crashes and near misses. At one point, the mask accidentally launched a stray potato at one of the gangsters, which ended up hitting him in the face with a satisfying thwack. Emotional ending. The chase came to an end at the French Riviera. The mask, tired from all the chaos, decided to finally put an end to all the mayhem. He knew that he couldn't continue being this symbol of chaos forever. Looking at the gangsters and the little boy and his father, the mask felt a sudden wave of overwhelming emotion. He was tired of running, tired of causing chaos. He wanted to just be Stanley for once. With a final burst of playful energy, the mask turned to the gangsters and, in a moment of sincere remorse, explained how his actions were born from a place of insecurity and loneliness. He apologized for any harm he had caused And for the first time, the gangsters saw Stanley in the mask, the troubled man who had been trying to create a positive environment for himself under a green face. Seeing the sincerity in the mask's eyes, and suddenly hearing both Mr. Bean and the reunited father and son telling stories of how the green-faced man had made their lives better, the gangsters started to reconsider their actions. They had initially been hired to catch him, but now they suddenly saw the good in him, even if it was hidden beneath a mask. With a sigh, the mask removed his mask, revealing a tired but relieved Stanley. The gangsters, now a part of the newfound friendship circle, joined Stanley Bean, the boy, and his father for a final goodbye before they parted ways. They shared one last laugh, a group photo, and a heartfelt goodbye, promising to stay in touch. Stanley, having learned the true meaning of friendship, luck, and the importance of being true to himself, decided to leave the mask behind. He realized that he didn't need a green face to be a good person. He knew that Bean, the boy, and the father were all proof of how he had touched other people's lives in a positive way, and that he could continue to do so without the mask. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the French Riviera, Stanley, Bean, the boy, and the reunited family watched the gangsters drive off into the distance. A new chapter had begun, a chapter filled with the promise of laughter, friendship, and the enduring power of a simple, genuine smile. And for Stanley, there was a profound peace in knowing that even without the mask, he could still be himself, and that sometimes that was more than enough. Join us today on Mr. Fictionality. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button so you don't miss our next video. See you soon.